Hi there, my name is Ewan Nicholson and welcome to my YouTube channel Remembering Love. The title of today's video is The Bad News is Healing Childhood Trauma Never Ends. No! And the good news is healing childhood trauma never ends. Yes! Let's look at that, let's see what that means, and let's explore what am I really talking about that? What is this kind of contradiction and paradox of how can it be both? So I'm just really going to share with you, how I have arrived at that point where I feel like it is kind of both and how one kind of evolves from the other. Now, when I began my healing journey, which I would probably say on a serious level was probably about 6 years ago, around the age 40, I'm 46 now. And I would define serious being my desire to heal and address my childhood trauma was more of a priority than was my kind of need to deny and avoid. And that was probably the turning point because, I think throughout my teenage years, 20s, I've always been interested in spirituality, self-development, self-growth. But the weight of it has been more about avoiding than it has about doing that work. And I could even look back and say, well, my interest in spirituality was really an unconscious form of spiritual bypass, that it was a lot easier to want to be one with the universe than it was to want to be one with my own pain. It was a lot easier to kind of feel angry at all the injustices of the world and the unnecessary violence against people than it was to kind of look at the violence I sort of conducted on myself. So, there was a certain point I arrived at where I realized, well, all these kind of external interests meant nothing if I was still, really just struggling with basic things like loving myself or caring for myself or looking after myself. So around about 40, I think that was my turning point where I said, you know what, this is serious, this is real, and I need to take it seriously. And that's when I would say, look, I began my healing journey of childhood trauma. And that was the recognition that I had it to begin with, because you could have asked me 20 years ago, I said, no, my childhood was good. So it was a recognition that I had it. It was a recognition that it was destructive. The unaddressed wounds were causing destructive things in my life and my relationships, and a desire to say, look, I want to address this. I really want to deal with these things. And I started therapy properly. I had kind of had therapists on and off before that, but this was the bit where I was really committed. I found a therapist, and my attitude was, look, how long do you think this is going to take to heal my childhood trauma? Are we talking 6 months, 9 months? Tell me what I need to do, sign me up, give me the list of things to do, the books to read. I'll deal with it and I'll be done. And to some degree, here I am 6 years later, and guess what? I'm not done, and I haven't fixed, inverted commas, and healed in a completed sense my childhood trauma. Because I guess to begin with, the way I looked at it was a little bit like this back pain, it's being diagnosed as X, Y, and Z. I'm going to a physiotherapist. He or she is going to do this work on it. In between, I'm going to do Pilates. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to stretch. And in 6 months' time, this back pain should be gone. And I no longer have this issue of back pain because I've done, things X, Y, and Z. And now this thing is behind me. And I had a similar attitude. It's like, here's this wound, here is this issue, and I'm just going to do the things I need to do to fix it. And what I discovered is, it's not quite like that. And as you uncover one layer, suddenly you find there's another layer. As you become conscious of something you were previously unconscious of, then there's something else that arises that you're not aware of, then you become aware of, and you think, well, if that's affecting me, I'm aware of it, what else is affecting me that I'm not aware of? And suddenly there's this sense of, the mist clears, and this childhood trauma suddenly goes from this little hill that I can kind of climb up and conquer to suddenly, feels a little bit like Mount Everest, where there's just, it's so big, I can't even see to the summit. And at that point, or that juncture where you realize the severity and gravity of it, and how big a task this is, it can feel daunting, and it can feel disheartening, and it can feel just straight out depressing. It's like, oh God, I'm never going to deal with this. And that feels like bad news. Like I'm wounded, I'm stuck, I'm kind of broken, and I'm going to be in therapy forever, and I'm never really going to be happy. And, my life now is just going to be this struggle of getting over my childhood, because at least when I was drinking and I was avoiding it, I was able to kind of keep it at bay. Now I've stopped all those things. I'm now no longer in denial, but now I have just this shitty reality that I now have to come to grips with and face is my life, my history, my story. And that does feel like, when you really take it in, it can feel like bad news. It can feel like the healing of my childhood trauma will never end, in a big sigh kind of way. And on one level, maybe that's necessary. Maybe you need to go through, because years of denial, years of avoidance, it's hard to get around. You have to take that in. And when you do, there is maybe a level of acceptance that comes with a certain kind of heaviness that you just have to kind of accept, to say, here we are, and this is real. Yet at the same time, as you go through that, and as you progress on your healing journey, and as you start working through some of the more acute symptoms and issues, and you start kind of little by little transforming and healing, and the pain of what was really acute and serious and debilitating one day suddenly loses some of that. And little by little, bit by bit, through patience and through process, you're able to that wound is able to kind of be discharged more and more and more. You suddenly realize, okay, I'm not where I was. And things have changed, and I can attest to that. In the last 6 years, I am so far from where I used to be, from a point of self-destruction, a point of self-awareness, a point of anxiety, a whole series of things. My life has radically changed, and I'm not where I was 6 years ago. So the process of understanding that healing childhood trauma never ends doesn't mean that you will be 10 years from now exactly where you are today. What it means is the process of healing just deepens, widens, and in some areas just gets easier, and it just gets more profound. And that is the good news. The good news is that process of my healing journey never does come to an end. That I can always be more loving, more whole, more self-compassionate, more self-aware. There never is an arbitrary point where I just draw this line and say, look, I finished, I've completed my course and examination in healing childhood trauma, now I'm done, I can move on to something else. Yet, Mike, it just doesn't seem to work that way. Yet that's not bad news, because what you end up discovering is you start on this journey of just really coming to grips with acute things, toxic shame, self-hatred, addiction, avoidance, disassociation. And as you start feeling like those things are less acute, then your healing journey evolves into something grander or wider. And it ends up encompassing something that is not special to survivors of childhood trauma. It ends up encompassing something that's really part of being human, which is, how do I have more meaning in my life? How do I find meaning? How do I be a more loving person and less egocentric? How do I be of more service? How do I contribute more? How do I be more patient? How do I find more peacefulness? And those questions are questions for everyone. That you could have had the most happiest, secure, safe childhood in the world, but you are still faced with those deeper questions. And what we have as survivors of childhood trauma, we have an understanding of suffering and pain. We have an understanding of our resilience. We have an understanding of how to transform that which is difficult into something which is profound. And we have a unique perspective on that. But at the same time, that existential question of what is life's meaning, what are we doing, where are we going, is a question everyone has to answer, one way or the other. And we have a unique entry point into that. We have a unique springboard into that. But eventually we end up asking the same questions everyone has to ask, which is, how do we find meaning? How do we be less egocentric? What is the purpose of life, divinity, love? But we're able to do it with a unique perspective. We were able to approach it with the tools that we've learned through dealing with these more acute issues. And to me, that never ends. That never ends. So to me, the bad news that healing childhood trauma never ends naturally evolves into the good news that healing childhood trauma never ends. And if you're somewhere in that journey, you're at the beginning of the journey and you kind of feel the weight of it, I implore you to trust the process, that things will get easier, that you will evolve and transcend some of the stuff you're dealing with now. But at the same time, there is this acceptance required that some of these issues that we have, we just can't get rid of. They're just not things, and they're not things to be got rid of. My youngest daughter has a lot of issues with her left leg. She's had a lot of surgeries. She has like a leg lengthening thing that she has to go through every few years, very painful. And as a result, she has some huge scars on her leg. She's got a scar from the top of her hip all the way across her knee. And these scars are always going to be there. You know, the reality is whatever happens in the future, the rest of her life, her left leg is going to be scarred. Now, what will change is her understanding of those scars. You know, she's 12 now, but by the time she's 20, 30, 40, 50, her understanding and interpretation of that pain and that scar will change and evolve and expand. But the reality of that scar itself won't. The reality of what happened to me growing up, what didn't happen to me growing up, and the scars that left, to some degree, I can't go back in a time machine and make that not happen. Those things happened. And although there's a part of me feels like I wish they didn't, part of me feels like I wish I could go back and alter it all, that'll never happen. The reality of that circumstance will never change. The reality of that history will never be undone. But what will change is my understanding of it, my experience of it, how it affects me, the expanse of my being and how I hold it, the container and awareness that is experienced within can expand, grow, and change. And that, to me, is exciting. That, to me, is the good news, that I can only keep growing. I can only keep expanding. I can only keep deepening my understanding of what it is to be human, what it is to be loving, what it is to have meaning in life. And that is the good news. So look, I hope this has helped. I hope this has made sense. I hope you've been able to relate to this. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I put out videos every week. And thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. And please take care. Bye-bye.